2,000 years before Eli Whitney. No factory floor, no precision instruments, no engineering school. Just bronze, clay moulds, and a weapons program so standardized that a soldier could pull a broken part from a dead man's crossbow, swap it into his own, and be back in the fight in under a minute. 15 of those systems are on this list. Industrial solutions so complete, so well engineered, that modern versions haven't improved on them. They've just renamed them. Binary computing, central banking, forensic science, pharmaceutical databases, continuous steel production, all of it. Running in China centuries, sometimes millennia, before the West claimed credit. By the end, you'll know which one Leibniz himself admitted he didn't invent. Chinese crossbows had a 3-part bronze trigger mechanism, a sear, a tumbler, a trigger lever. Each part was cast separately. Each part was interchangeable. If your trigger broke in battle, you didn't need a new crossbow. You swapped in a new trigger. This is standardized manufacturing in the 4th century BC. Mass production with quality control. Archaeologists found triggers from different cities. They fit perfectly into each other's crossbows. Tolerances within 0.5 millimeter. This is precision engineering, and it gave China's armies a terrifying advantage. A crossbow could pierce armor at long distances that ordinary bows struggled to reach. A trained archer needed years of practice. A crossbow soldier needed 1 week. You could arm a peasant and make him lethal. This is force multiplication through technology. The trigger mechanism used mechanical advantage. A small pull on the trigger released massive tension in the bow. This is the same principle in every firearm, every power tool, every hydraulic press. China figured it out 2,400 years ago. Shang bronze casting was not blacksmithing. It relied on a distinctive piece mold process. Artisans first created a full clay model of the vessel. They then pressed clay sections around that model to create a full clay model of the vessel. They then pressed clay sections around that model to create an outer mould in multiple interlocking pieces. The model was removed, the mould reassembled, and molten bronze was poured into the cavity between inner core and outer sections. Then they poured molten bronze, a precise alloy of copper and tin, into that void. When the clay was broken away, what remained was a hollow, intricate vessel with walls thinner than a fingernail and surface detail sharper than most modern castings. Forensic studies of Shang and Zhou bronzes show something remarkable: a high degree of correlation between copper and tin content across hundreds of artifacts spanning centuries. This was an empirically determined recipe, a metallurgical standard, maintained and transmitted across generations. Trace amounts of gold found in early Chinese bronzes have been linked to tin placer deposits in northeast China, which tells us these artisans understood not just how to alloy metals, but where their raw materials came from and what impurities those sources carried. Smelting sites like Baidian and Xinkan reveal diverse production techniques. Some workshops co-melted metallic copper and tin, others co-melted raw ores, indicating a network of specialized facilities, not a single centralized forge. We tend to think ancient means crude. Shang bronze was more chemically consistent than anything produced in Europe for the next 2,000 years. These weren't primitive people experimenting with fire. They were running a metallurgical supply chain with quality control, standardized alloy ratios, and regional specialization. You're running an empire with 60 million people. Food grown in the south must feed armies in the north. Fail at logistics? Your empire collapses. Chinese engineers built a 1,000-mile supply line that connected North and South China. Grain, taxes, and troops flowed on schedule across distances equivalent to crossing the entire United States. They did it using only water, locks, and administrative genius. The Grand Canal enabled centralized control of food supply and military logistics on a scale never before achieved. The system was so effective, it remained the backbone of Chinese logistics for over 1,000 years. This wasn't just moving food, it was stability flowing through water. Modern logistics companies study this system. Amazon's distribution network uses the same principles. The Chinese figured out continental logistics without computers, trucks, or trains. While the rest of the world was still using the bloomery process, a low-temperature method that produced small lumps of pasty wrought iron at 800 to 1,000 degrees, China had developed the blast furnace by the 5th century BC. The Han government recognized the strategic value of this technology and in 117 BC established a state monopoly over iron production, constructing massive blast furnaces in Henan province. Pushed internal temperatures above 1,130 degrees Fahrenheit pushed internal temperatures above 1,130 degrees Celsius, hot enough to produce liquid iron. Not a pasty lump, not a spongy mass that needed hours of hammering. Liquid metal that could be poured into moulds and cast into any shape. Large-scale liquid iron production would not become widespread in Europe for many centuries. And the Han didn't stop at cast iron. Cast iron is hard but brittle. It shatters under impact. So Han metallurgists developed the finery forge and puddling process. They remelted cast iron and injected oxygen into the melt, burning off excess carbon. The result was wrought iron, tough, malleable and weldable, or, with precise carbon control, steel. This is the same basic chemistry that Henry Cort patented in England in 1784. The Han were doing it around 200 BC, an 18th century head start. Picture a Han ironworks in Henan, a water wheel turning in a river connected by wooden gears to a bellows system, pumping air into a furnace taller than a man. Liquid iron flows from the tap hole at the base. Workers channel it into sand moulds, plough blades, axe heads, crossbow fittings, cooking pots. This is not a craftsman's workshop. This is a state-run industrial plant, producing standardized metal goods at a volume that wouldn't be matched in the West until the English Midlands in the 18th century. There is a story about Fang, possibly the same alchemist, possibly a different woman who shares the name, that sounds impossible on its face. Her husband needed ceremonial silk robes. She produced them overnight, not rough cloth, finished garments, ready to wear, appearing as if from nothing. The legend calls it conjuring. Historians call it something more useful, evidence of a production system so efficient it looked supernatural to people who didn't understand the logistics behind it. To understand why that matters, you need to know what silk actually requires. Raw silk comes from silkworm cocoons. Each cocoon is a single continuous thread, up to 1 kilometre long, wound tightly around the pupa inside. To get to that thread, you kill the pupa with heat before it breaks the cocoon from the inside, then reel the thread off in one unbroken piece. That part is slow and careful work. Then comes degumming. Raw silk is coated in a protein called sericin, the natural glue that holds the cocoon together. Sericin makes the fibre stiff, dull and rough. To get the soft, bright silk that made China famous across the ancient world, you dissolve the sericin in a chemical bath without damaging the fibre underneath. Get the timing wrong, the fibre breaks. Get the temperature wrong, the fibre breaks. Get the chemistry wrong, the fibre breaks. The window is narrow. There is no shortcut. After degumming comes reeling, spinning, dyeing, weaving and finishing. Each step has physical limits. Each step takes time. To produce finished ceremonial garments at the speed the legend describes, you would need fibre stocks held at different stages of completion, a rapid finishing process that could take near-complete cloth to wearable garment in hours, and a system that anticipated demand before it was asked for. That is a supply chain, a pre-positioned, demand-anticipating supply chain, running in ancient China, centuries before the concept had a name. And here is the part worth pausing on. No synthetic fibre has fully replaced silk, not one. Kevlar beats it in raw strength. Polyester beats it in cost. Nylon beats it in durability. But nothing matches the full combination. The way silk regulates temperature, holds colour, drapes against the body and feels against skin. The global silk market still runs into the billions every year because the material itself remains, in a practical sense, unmatched. We have been trying to copy it for over a century. We've matched individual properties. We haven't matched the whole thing. Whether Fang ran a magic workshop or a brilliantly organized production line, the legend points to something real. Ancient Chinese silk processing was so far ahead of every other culture that it looked supernatural to outsiders. The Silk Road existed because no one else could make this material. That lead lasted for centuries. We think fast fashion and supply chain management are modern ideas. These workshops were solving the same problems 1500 years ago, and the material they produced is still better than anything we've made since. You want to buy a shipment of silk worth 1,000 coins. But here's the problem. Those coins are made of iron, heavy iron. 1,000 coins weighs 25 kilograms. That's 55 pounds. Just to carry your money, you need a pack animal. Want to buy something worth 10,000 coins? You need a cart? 100,000 coins? You need a wagon train. Trade was literally limited by how much metal you could physically carry. Rich merchants were getting hernias just from counting their money. Commerce was being strangled by the weight of currency itself. During the Song Dynasty, Sichuan merchants were drowning in iron coins. A simple business transaction required carrying more metal than most people could lift. So they did something radical. They started issuing promissory notes to each other. I owe you 1,000 coins. These notes were lighter, easier to transport, and could represent any amount of value. But here's where it gets brilliant. In 1023 CE, the Song government realized what was happening. Instead of shutting it down, they took it over. They standardized the notes, added security features, created official denominations, and most importantly, they backed it with government authority. Within one generation, paper money had completely displaced iron coins in the region. The world's first cashless society was born in ancient China. Why was this so revolutionary? Because it solved three massive problems simultaneously. First, the weight problem. Paper could represent unlimited value while weighing almost nothing. A merchant could carry 1,000,000 coins worth of value in his pocket. Second, the scalability problem. You can only mine so much metal, but you can print as much paper as you need. Commerce was no longer limited by the physical supply of metal. Third, the trust problem. Government backing meant people trusted the paper because they trusted the authority behind it. They had sophisticated security features, official seals, standardized designs, serial numbers, anti-counterfeiting measures. The Song government created the world's first central banking system. They controlled the money supply, they managed inflation, they regulated exchange rates, they even figured out the dangers. By 1192 CE, the Song government had overprinted notes and created the world's first documented inflation crisis. They learned about monetary policy the hard way. Everyone thinks paper money is obvious. Of course, paper can represent value, but it's not obvious at all. It's one of the most abstract concepts in human history. Think about it. Convincing an entire civilization that a piece of paper is worth the same as a pile of metal. That requires a level of social trust and governmental authority that most ancient civilizations never achieved. That single idea powers every dollar bill, credit card, and digital payment you use today. The Chinese had something called the Bamian Shenwei Pao. Translation? The 8-direction divine power cannon. This weapon fired in 8 different directions at the same time. Let me paint you a picture. You're commanding an enemy fleet. You approach a Chinese warship. You think you're safe attacking from the side while their main cannon faces forward. Suddenly, cannon fire erupts from everywhere. Front, back, left, right. All the angles between. Your entire battle plan just became useless. Here's proof that will shock you. When Portuguese traders first saw these weapons in Chinese waters during the 1500s, they were blown away. They reverse-engineered them. They even kept the Chinese name. They called their copied cannons Folangji, after the original Chinese design. Knowledge is power, but only if you can spread it. Copying books by hand takes months. One mistake ruins the entire manuscript. In 1040 CE, I-Ching created movable type printing. Gutenberg gets the credit 400 years later. But I-Ching approached printing differently, not as a single machine, but as a modular system where information itself could be rearranged and reused. I-Ching used ceramic pieces, each one a single character, arranged on iron plates coated with resin, wax, and paper ash. The concept was revolutionary. Modular, reusable type that could be rearranged for different texts. When this technology reached Europe 4 centuries later, it transformed the world. The printing press enabled the Renaissance, the Reformation, the scientific revolution. Every font on your computer uses I-Ching's principle. Digital typography, laser printing. Even this video's text overlays. We're still using his idea nearly 1,000 years later. But spreading knowledge required something even more fundamental. Now let's talk about fire. Not campfire, not forge fire. Industrial fire. To make steel, you need temperatures above 1,400 degrees Celsius. That's hot enough to melt rock. In year 31, a Chinese engineer named Du Shi had a problem. His workers were exhausted. They pumped bellows by hand for 12 hours a day. Their arms gave out. Production stopped. So Du Shi did something radical. He connected the bellows to a water wheel. Here's how it worked. A river turns the wheel. The wheel has cams on its axle. Cams are just bumps that push things. As the wheel spins, the cams push the bellows handles down. When the cam rotates away, the bellows spring back up, down, up, constant, automatic, tireless. This is mechanical automation in the year 31. The result? Blast furnaces could run 24 hours a day. Temperature control became stable. Steel production exploded. By 1078, China produced 114,000 tons of iron per year. The United Kingdom didn't match that until 1788, 700 years later. Let me say that again. China's iron output in the year 1078 wasn't matched by Britain until 1788. This wasn't just a bellows. This was the birth of continuous industrial production, and it ran on nothing but flowing water. Maternal mortality was the silent killer of every ancient civilization. Women died in childbirth, babies died in the first weeks of life. Nobody understood why. Nobody could see germs. Nobody had modern medicine. But generations of female doctors in China refused to accept it. They built something the world had never seen before. A clinical system, a way of treating the human body as a complex environment, not just a collection of symptoms. They observed patients over months, years, decades. They documented cases, they tested treatments, they tracked what worked and what didn't. They created hygiene rituals, environmental controls, long-term monitoring protocols. They passed this knowledge from one female doctor to the next, generation after generation. The clinical thinking they developed eventually informed the work of modern Chinese obstetrics, the entire foundation of how China cares for mothers and babies today. Modern healthcare's systemic approach, treating the patient as a responsive system rather than a broken machine, is a direct descendant of their work. The germ theory came later. The systems thinking came first. They didn't have microscopes. They had something more powerful: patience, observation, and pattern recognition across generations. Think of the Compendium of Materia Medica, Bencao Gangmu, from 1596 as the world's first exhaustive drug database, compiled by Li Shizhen over 27 years. It listed 1,892 medicines, from herbs and minerals to animal parts, with over 11,000 prescriptions. It wasn't the first herbal manual in China, but it was by far the most complete and systematic. Essentially, data-driven medicine of its era. Li Shizhen critically reviewed all earlier literature, added his own experiments, corrected mistakes. He bravely pointed out which traditional remedies were ineffective or misidentified. The result in 52 volumes was an organized reference that even classified substances by category and medicinal function. In many ways, this was the first clinical drug reference book. Akin to a physician's desk reference or modern pharmacopoeia, it epitomizes pharmaceutical achievements of East Asia before the 16th century and heralds the dawn of modern pharmacology. When European missionaries got copies in the 17th century, it astonished them. Nothing so comprehensive existed in the West yet. Today's pharmacopoeias serve a similar role, providing standard information on drugs. Li Shizhen's work even included toxicity, preparation, and antidotes. An early form of drug safety data, the Bencao Gangmu was essentially a 16th century database that physicians could consult to treat patients. It's no wonder it's on UNESCO's Memory of the World Register. Every time you search a drug on WebMD or look up an herb in a supplement guide, you're using the same practice Li Shizhen championed. Compiling and curating medical knowledge for general use. By replacing our brief mention of Chinese invented hormones with this mass data collection effort, we stress how methodical and empirical Chinese medicine could be. You think lockdowns were invented in 2020? Try 206 BC. As early as the Han Dynasty, Chinese authorities were already isolating the sick in separate houses on the edge of towns. Centuries later, by the southern Song Dynasty, these evolved into dedicated quarantine facilities known as Anji houses, literally houses for pestilence. The state recognized something brilliant. Distance stops death. Infected people were moved to dedicated buildings, separate rooms, separate wards, state-funded doctors. This was the first systemic logistics approach to disease control, a human firewall. The blueprint for every isolation ward you see today. The Han administration didn't have microscopes. They didn't know what germs were, but they understood the mechanics of transmission. If you separate the sick from the healthy, the disease can't jump. It's basic network theory applied to biology. Modern epidemiologists use the same principle. They call it contact tracing and isolation protocols. Lockdowns weren't invented in 2020. They're a 2,000-year-old engineering solution. The year is 1247. A farmer is slashed to death in a village. No witnesses, no clues. The local magistrate, Song Dynasty, has an idea. He orders every villager to lay their sickles on the ground in the hot sun. Within minutes, blowflies swarm to one specific sickle, invisible traces of blood and tissue. The owner confesses on the spot. This case is documented in the book Collected Cases of Injustice Rectified, the world's oldest forensic investigation manual. Song Dynasty knew something simple but powerful. Insects are far better than humans at detecting tiny traces of blood and tissue. The human eye sees nothing. The fly sees a feast. He used insect behavior as crime scene evidence. Modern forensic science still studies insect activity on corpses to estimate time of death. They call it forensic entomology. CSI didn't start in a lab. It started in a rice field with a swarm of flies. Song Dynasty recorded one of the earliest documented cases of biological crime scene analysis, centuries before Western forensic textbooks existed. A patient sits down. The doctor doesn't ask questions, he just touches the wrist. He feels 3 positions, 3 levels of pressure. That's 9 readings per wrist. He's reading 24 different pulse types. Slippery, like beads rolling. String-like, like a musical instrument. Surging, like large waves. This is the I-Ching, the pulse classic, from 300 AD. Physician Wang Shuhei wrote it. Modern medicine confirms it. A string-like pulse indicates arterial stiffness. A slippery pulse indicates increased blood volume during pregnancy. Chinese doctors had a diagnostic algorithm 2,000 years ago. They used their fingers as a manual heart monitor. They didn't have stethoscopes or EKGs. So they developed an incredibly refined system of pulse reading. They felt the pulse at 3 positions on each wrist with 3 levels of pressure, superficial to deep. That's 9 readings per patient. Forming a holistic picture, they could diagnose weak heart qi, digestive issues, even pregnancy, just from pulse qualities. Today, AI sensors digitize the same pulse patterns. We finally invented the microscopes to see why they were right. The human wrist is a high-speed data port. We just forgot how to read it. The pulse tells the doctor what is wrong, but what if your lungs are closing up? What if you can't breathe? The solution was a small green herb that modern farmers spent billions of dollars to put into a little blue pill you take every winter. The year is 1703. A German mathematician named Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz is working on a problem. He's trying to create a universal language, a language made of pure logic. He's experimenting with numbers. And he discovers something. You can represent any number using only 2 symbols, 0 and 1. This is binary arithmetic, the foundation of every computer, every phone, every digital device. But Leibniz didn't invent it. He admits this in a letter. He writes that the Chinese hexagrams of the I-Ching unexpectedly line up with his new binary arithmetic, and he presents them as a kind of ancient confirmation of his system. The I-Ching, an ancient Chinese text 3,000 years old. It's a divination manual used to predict the future, but it's built on a code. The code uses 2 symbols, a solid line, yang, a broken line, yin, solid, broken, solid, broken. You stack them in groups of 6. Each group is a hexagram. There are 64 possible hexagrams. Now watch this. If you map the solid line to 1 and the broken line to 0, you get binary. Hexagram 1, 6 solid lines, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. That's 63 in binary. Hexagram 2, 6 broken lines, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. That's 0 in binary. Every hexagram is a 6-bit binary number. The I-Ching is a binary lookup table. Leibniz saw this. He mapped it out, he published it, and he credited the I-Ching. But here's the question. Did the ancient Chinese know they were using binary? Probably not. They thought they were mapping the universe, the interplay of opposites, light and dark, hard and soft, on and off. But that's exactly what binary is, on and off, 1 and 0, true and false. The I-Ching is a philosophical computer. It processes questions, it outputs answers. It's not electronic, but it's computational, and it's 3,000 years old. Now let's go deeper. In 1937, a man named Claude Shannon writes a master's thesis. He proves that electrical circuits can perform logic. If a switch is on, that's 1. If it's off, that's 0. You can chain switches together. You can make AND gates, OR gates, NOT gates. You can build a computer. This is the birth of digital computing. But the logic? It's binary. The same binary Leibniz found in the I-Ching. The same binary the ancient Chinese used to map reality. Every transistor in your computer is a switch, on or off, 1 or 0, yang or yin. Your phone has 15 billion transistors, 15 billion switches, all following the same logic, the logic of the I-Ching. Now here's the final twist. The I-Ching wasn't just a book, it was a worldview. The Chinese believed reality itself was binary. Everything is a balance of opposites, hot and cold, wet and dry, motion and stillness. And in a poetic way, they were onto something. Modern physics also describes many things in pairs, positive and negative charges, spin up and spin down, quantum states that act like 0 and 1. The universe often behaves in binary patterns, even if the ancient Chinese were expressing it as philosophy rather than laboratory science. They didn't have the math, they didn't have the technology, but they had the insight. They saw the pattern, they wrote it down, and 3,000 years later, we're still using it. Every Google search, every Netflix stream, every text message, it's all ones and zeros. It's all yang and yin. It's all the I-Ching. The digital age isn't new. It's a restitution, a return to ancient knowledge. Leibniz said it himself. A restitution of meaning after a great interval of time. We didn't invent the code, we rediscovered it. Look across all 15 of these systems and one pattern holds. Binary logic, interchangeable parts, central banking, forensic science, quarantine protocols. None of them originated where the textbooks say they did. They were built, tested and refined in China, then rediscovered centuries later by people who had no idea they were following a map someone else had already drawn. We didn't lose this knowledge because it failed. We lost it because the people who found it second got to write the history. Most of what this channel covers works exactly like that. Not forgotten because it was wrong, but set aside because someone else got the credit. If recovering that kind of knowledge matters to you, the next story is one click away.